Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku never entered UA. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sensation was not pain, at least not at first. It was intrusion. It was the feeling of something wet, cold, and smelling of sewage forcing its way down his throat, violating the sanctity of his lungs. Izuku Midoriya clawed at the fluid mass encompassing him. His fingernails scraped uselessly against liquid sludge. His vision was a blur of green and brown, the world outside distorted like a bad watercolor painting. He could hear a voice, guttural, amused, vibrating directly against his eardrums. But the words were lost in the panic of asphyxiation. I'm dying, Izuku thought. The realization was strangely detached. I'm dying here, under a bridge, and no one knows. His notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. It was lying on the concrete, scorched and soaked. That hurt almost as much as the lack of oxygen. It was his legacy, a pathetic diary of a quirkless boy who thought he could stand among gods. Then, the pressure vanished. A blast of wind pressure, sharp and sudden, scattered the sludge like leaves in a hurricane. Izuku hit the pavement, gasping, his lungs burning as they welcomed the sweet, polluted air of Muzurifu. He looked up, tears blurring his vision, and saw him. The silhouette was unmistakable. The towering height, the two tufts of blonde hair standing like antennae, the smile that defied the darkness of the world. All Might. Izuku wheezed, blacking out. When he woke, the world was too bright. He was being slapped lightly on the cheek. Hey! Hey! Thank goodness! Izuku bolted upright. The number one hero was standing over him. The autograph was already in his notebook. The adrenaline spiked, overriding the fear. He had questions. He had a lifetime of questions compressed into a singular, burning need for validation. But All Might was leaving. He was launching himself into the sky. Izuku didn't think. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. He just moved. It was a habit of his, moving before thinking, usually to his own detriment. He latched onto the hero's leg, the wind whipping his face, the ground rapidly receding until the buildings looked like toys. They landed on a rooftop. The wind died down. The silence of the altitude was heavy. This was it. The moment. All Might was steaming, coughing. Izuku was too focused on his own trembling hands to notice the hero's posture faltering. All Might, Izuku said, his voice cracking. He stared at his red shoes. I have no quirk. He squeezed his eyes shut. I'm constantly made fun of. Everyone thinks I'm useless. But saving people, it's the coolest thing someone can do. I want to save people with a fearless smile. I want to be just like you. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, his soul laid bare on the concrete roof. Can I be a hero, even without a quirk? The silence stretched. It wasn't the thoughtful silence of a teacher considering a student's answer. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a hospital waiting room. The steam cleared. Izuku blinked. The towering muscular god was gone. In his place stood a skeletal man with sunken eyes, looking more like a ghost than a savior. What? Izuku whispered. The man sighed, sliding down to sit against the railing. He lifted his shirt. The scar was a spiderweb of mangled tissue, a crater in the side of a living legend. It looked like a topographic map of pain. I lost my respiratory system, the man said, his voice hollow. My stomach was destroyed. I've wasted away from the surgeries. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. Izuku stared, horror struck. The world thinks I am a symbol that never wavers. All Might continued, looking out at the city skyline. But that is a heavy burden to bear, young man. I smiled to hide the fear inside, to trick myself and the pressure. He looked at Izuku. The blue eyes were dull, lacking the electric charge they held on television. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too many bodies. Pros are always risking their lives against villains, All Might said softly. Without power, can one be a hero? No, I don't think so. The words hit Izuku like physical blows. 1, 2, 3, no. I don't think so. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't Kaken's explosive mockery or his mother's tearful apology. It was a fact. It was stated with the objective finality of a medical diagnosis. If you want to help people, there's always the police force, All Might added, standing up slowly, his skeletal frame trembling slightly in the wind. They get a lot of flack because the heroes capture the villains, but it's a fine profession. He walked toward the stairwell door. It's not bad to dream. But you also have to consider the reality, young man. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof. The wind picked up, biting through his gakurin. He looked at his hand. He had reached out, and he had been slapped away by the very hand that held up the sky. Reality. The word tasted like ash. Izuku didn't remember walking down the stairs. He didn't remember leaving the building. He wandered the streets of Muzurifu like a ghost, the sounds of the city muffled as if he were underwater. Consider the reality. He stopped at an intersection. A crowd had gathered. Smoke billowed into the sky. Explosions rattled the windows of nearby shops. A villain attack, his mind registered automatically. I should go see. I can take notes. Then he stopped. Why? Why take notes? Notes for who? Notes for a future that didn't exist? He turned to walk away, but a sound stopped him. A scream. Not a scream of fear, but a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. Kaken. Izuku turned back. He pushed through the crowd. He saw the flames. He saw the sludge villain, the same one that had nearly killed him, towering over a hostage. Bakugo Katsuki was suffocating. The explosions from his palms were wild, uncontrolled, serving only to feed the fires around them. The heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, were standing back. My quirk isn't suitable. I can't get close. We have to wait for someone with a suitable quirk. They were waiting. They were watching a middle schooler die because the matchup wasn't favorable. Izuku's legs tensed. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run forward. His muscles coiled. Go. Save him. But then, the voice in his head spoke. It wasn't his voice. It was deep, American accented, and tired. Without power, can one be a hero? No, I don't think so. Izuku froze. The tape in his mind played on a loop. You cannot. You cannot. It is too dangerous. If he ran in there, what would he do? Throw his backpack? Claw at the sludge again? He would just be another hostage. He would make it harder for the heroes. He would be a liability. He watched Bakugo's eyes. They were wide, terrified, pleading. For a split second, they locked onto Izuku in the crowd. Help me. Izuku took a step forward. His shoes scraped the pavement, but he didn't run. He stood there, trembling, his nails digging into his palms until they bled. He watched. He watched as Bakugo struggled. He watched as the seconds ticked by, agonizingly slow. I am useless, Izuku thought, the self-hatred cold and heavy in his gut. I am watching my childhood friend die because I am nothing. Then a blur. All Might appeared. Not the skeleton, but the hero. He smashed through the defense, grabbed Bakugo, and changed the weather with a single punch. Rain fell on the fires. The crowd cheered. The photographers snapped photos. It was over in seconds. Later, behind the police tape, the heroes scolded Izuku. You should have evacuated. Death Arms yelled, pointing a finger at Izuku's chest. You were just standing there in the splash zone. You could have gotten hurt. Then, they turned to Bakugo. They praised him. They complimented his quirk, his tenacity, his potential. You're going to be a great sidekick one day, kid. Izuku walked home alone. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. He felt hollowed out. He had hesitated. When it mattered most, he had listened to the logic, and because of that, he had done nothing. Bakugo caught up to him a few blocks from their houses. He looked disheveled, smelling of smoke and burnt sugar. Deku! Izuku stopped, but he didn't turn around. I didn't ask for your help. Bakugo shouted, his voice hoarse. But you didn't even try. You just stood there staring like a damn fish. Bakugo panted, waiting for a response. When none came, he scoffed. Guess you finally realized your place. Useless. Bakugo stomped off. Izuku walked home. I'm home, he whispered to the empty entryway. Izuku! His mother rushed to him. She saw the grime on his clothes. "Oh my God, I saw the news! Were you near that fire? Are you okay?" She hugged him. She was crying. "I'm fine, Mom," Izuku said. His voice was flat. "I was so worried. You have to be careful, Izuku. It's dangerous out there for—" She trailed off. "She didn't say for someone like you," but the words hung in the air between them. "I know," Izuku said. He pulled away and went to his room. He sat at his desk. All Might smiled down at him from 100 posters. The limited edition Silver Age figures stared at him from the shelf. Consider the reality. Izuku reached out and took the poster off the wall. Then the next one. Then the figure. He didn't tear them. He didn't smash them. He just took them down, one by one, and placed them into a cardboard box in the corner of his room. When the walls were bare, leaving only the pale rectangles where the sun hadn't hit the wallpaper, Izuku sat in the dark. He opened his laptop. The UA application form was still open on the browser. Delete, his mind said, but his finger hovered over the mouse. He couldn't be a hero. The greatest hero in the world had told him so. But giving up felt like dying. "I'll take the test," he whispered to the dark room. "I'll take the test, fail, and then I'll know. I'll have proof that it's impossible." It was a grim resolve. He wasn't training to win anymore. He was training to witness his own funeral. 10 months later, the beach park was still filled with trash. There had been no montage. There had been no screaming at the ocean while hauling refrigerators on his back. Izuku had jogged. He had done push-ups in his bedroom until his arms shook. He had studied math, history, and literature until his eyes burned. But he hadn't cleared the beach. One boy, without a quirk and without a mentor, couldn't move mountains of garbage. He had managed to clear a small pathway, a tiny circle of clean sand amidst the rot. It was a pathetic metaphor for his efforts. The day of the exam arrived with a gray, overcast sky. Yue High School. The Golden Arches. The Fortress of Dreams. Izuku walked through the gates. He felt like an imposter. Around him, students were showing off. A boy with engines in his legs was marching stiffly. A girl with flushed cheeks was floating her backpack. Izuku kept his head down. "Don't look at anyone. Just get it over with. Move aside, Deku." Bakugo walked past him, shoulder-checking him. He didn't even look back. He seemed focused, intense. He didn't view Izuku as an obstacle anymore. He viewed him as background noise. The written exam was easy. Izuku breezed through it. The questions about quirk laws, historical events, and tactical mathematics were things he had been obsessing over since he was 4 years old. He wrote furiously, his pencil a blur. For a few hours he forgot he was quirkless. He was just Izuku, the boy who knew everything. Then came the practical. They were ushered into a massive auditorium for the briefing. Present mic was loud. The explanation was simple. Robots. Points. Destruction. Destruction. Izuku looked at his hands. Soft. Uncalloused. He gripped his gym uniform pants. How do I destroy a robot with these? He was assigned to Battle Center B. He stood before the massive gates, surrounded by other examinees. They were stretching, revving up quirks, psyching themselves up. "I'm going to crush this!" Someone yelled. "Watch out, I'm aiming for top spot." Izuku stood still. He adjusted his red sneakers. He had duct-taped his ankles for support. It felt laughable now. "Start!" Present Mike screamed from the tower. There are no countdowns in real battles. The crowd surged forward. Izuku was buffeted by the wake of 100 powered teenagers. He ran. He ran because standing still was worse. Inside the mock city, it was chaos. Explosions, lasers, crumbling concrete. Crash! A one-pointer, a mechanical drone on wheels, burst through a wall. It locked onto a student nearby. The student, a boy with laser fingers, blasted it apart. 1 point! The boy cheered. Izuku kept running. He turned a corner. A 2-pointer, shaped like a scorpion, lunged. Izuku scrambled back, tripping over his own feet. Target acquired, the robot droned. Izuku looked around for a weapon. A pipe? A brick? Before he could move, a laser beam sliced the robot in half. A French-looking boy sparkled past him. Merci, Izuku scrambled up. I need 1 point. Just one. He ran down an alleyway. He saw a 3-pointer. It was huge. It was fighting a girl with vines for hair, too big. I can't fight that. Minutes ticked by. The sounds of destruction were deafening. Izuku's lungs burned. His score was 0. 0. 0. He saw other students racking up points. He saw their quirks in action. He analyzed them automatically. Her acid is viscous, good for melting joints. His tail is strong, but he leaves his left side open. But analysis didn't destroy robots. Then, the ground shook. The 0-pointer. The gimmick. It rose above the buildings, a titan of metal and malice. It blocked out the sun. The shockwave of its movement shattered windows. The other examinees turned and ran. Run away! It's huge! Don't fight it. It's worth nothing. Izuku turned to run. It was the logical choice. The survival choice. Ow! A voice. Izuku froze. He looked back. The girl with the round face, the one he had almost bumped into at the gates, was trapped under rubble. The 0-pointer was looming over her. Its treads were crushing the pavement, inching closer. She's going to die. The thought was instant. Izuku's body tensed. The tape played again. Without power, can one be a hero? He looked at the robot. It was 50 feet tall. It was made of reinforced steel. He looked at his fist. No. If he ran in there, he would die. And he wouldn't save her. He couldn't punch that robot. He couldn't lift that rubble. If he ran in, he would just be 2 corpses instead of 1. Tears pricked his eyes. He hated himself. He hated his weakness. But he stayed rooted to the spot. Someone! He screamed, his voice tearing at his throat. Help her! Someone with a strength quirk. Please! He pointed. He jumped up and down. He made himself a beacon. Over here! She's trapped. A boy with engines in his legs. Wait, no, the one with the glasses, stopped running. He looked where Izuku was pointing. He saw the girl. Idiot! The boy with glasses yelled, not at Izuku, but at the situation. He revved his engines. Recipro burst. He moved like a bullet. He didn't attack the robot. He slid under the rubble, braced his armored legs, and heaved. The concrete shifted. He grabbed the girl and zoomed out of the path of the treads just as the 0-pointer crushed the spot where she had been. Time's up! The siren wailed. The dust settled. Izuku fell to his knees. He was shaking. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He hadn't saved anyone. He had just screamed. The boy with glasses was checking on the girl. The recovery girl was arriving. Izuku looked at his hands. They were clean. 0 points. He vomited on the pavement. The week that followed was a blur of gray. Izuku went to school. He sat in class. He took notes. He went home. He stared at the ceiling. The letter from Yue arrived. He sat at the dinner table. His mother was in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but the water had been running for 10 minutes. She was terrified for him. Izuku opened the envelope. A holographic disc slid out. All Might appeared. I am here. As a projection, Izuku watched with dead eyes. Young Midoriya, All Might said. The recording was generic at first, then it cut to specifics. You took the entrance exam. Your written score was phenomenal. One of the highest we've seen in years. Truly, a brilliant mind. Izuku felt a flicker of something. Hope? No. Mockery. However, All Might's voice dropped. The practical exam is strict. You failed to disable a single robot. 0 combat points. The screen showed the leaderboard. Izuku Midoriya 0. But... All Might raised a finger. A hero isn't just about fighting. There are rescue points. We looked at the footage. We saw you point out the trapped examinee. We saw you call for help. Izuku's heart hammered. You alerted young Ida to the danger. You acted as a spotter. For that quick thinking, we awarded you 10 rescue points. 10. The passing threshold was usually around 40. 10 points, All Might said, his voice softening. It is a noble effort. But at UA High, we require more than effort. We require power. The hologram flickered. I am sorry, young Midoriya. You did not pass. The hologram faded. Silence filled the apartment. Izuku? Inko called out softly. Izuku stood up. He walked to his room. He closed the door. He didn't cry. He felt like he had run out of tears a long time ago. He had failed. It was official. The universe had signed and stamped the document declaring him useless. Police officer, All Might had said. Doctor. Izuku sat at his desk. The bare walls mocked him. He pulled out a notebook. Not a hero analysis notebook. Just a blank school notebook. I should start studying for the general high school exams, he thought. Aldera isn't good enough. Maybe Shiketsu's general ed? Or a technical school? He turned on the TV for background noise. The news was playing. Breaking news, villain attack in Shibuya. Pro-hero Death Arms struggles against the villain Gorgon. Izuku glanced at the screen. The villain, Gorgon, had snakes for hair that turned things to stone, but only organic matter. Death Arms was trying to punch him. Every time he got close, his skin started to turn gray, and he had to retreat. Why is he punching? Izuku muttered. His quirk is super strength, but the villain is a close-range specialist. He watched Death Arms try again. And fail again. The villain was laughing, smashing up a jewelry store. The snakes, Izuku whispered. They track movement. Look at the eyes. They aren't looking at Death Arms' face, they're looking at his fists. Izuku leaned forward. Another hero arrived. Gunhead. He tried to shoot keratin spikes. The snakes slapped them away. No, no, no! Izuku grabbed a pen. He opened the notebook. The villain is standing on a subway grate. His quirk relies on grounding to maintain the petrification field. Look at his feet. He's absorbing minerals from the concrete. Izuku sketched furiously. Weakness, break the ground beneath him. Or use a smokescreen to blind the snakes. If they can't see movement, they can't target. On the screen, the heroes were flailing. They were causing more damage to the street than the villain was. They were strong. They were powerful. But they were fighting harder, not smarter. Why don't they see it? Izuku asked the empty room. It's so obvious. He watched for 10 more minutes. Finally, Empty Lady arrived and simply kicked a building over onto the villain. It worked, but the collateral damage was massive. The repair costs would be millions. Inefficient, Izuku wrote. Reckless. He looked at his notebook. In 5 minutes, he had dissected the villain's quirk, identified the weakness, and formulated a plan that would have caused 0 property damage. The heroes had taken 20 minutes and destroyed a city block. Izuku stared at the page. They have the power, he thought. But they don't have the eyes. All Might's words echoed again. Without power, can one be a hero? Maybe not, Izuku whispered. He looked at the 0 points on his rejection letter. Then he looked at his analysis. Maybe I can't be the fist, he said, his voice gaining a strange, trembling edge. Maybe I can't be the one who smiles and punches the sky. He remembered the sludge villain. The heroes waiting for the right quirk. He remembered the exam. The students destroying blindly. He remembered the news. The brute force solving a puzzle. There was a gap. A massive, gaping hole in the heroes' society. Everyone was obsessed with quirks. Everyone was obsessed with power. They had forgotten how to think. Izuku turned to a fresh page in the notebook. His hand shook, not with fear, but with a sudden, electric realization. If I can't be a hero, Izuku muttered, the pen digging into the paper, then I will be the one who tells the heroes how to do their jobs properly. He wrote a header. The Oracle. I'll find the villains they can't find. I'll solve the cases they're too stupid to solve. I'll figure out the weaknesses they're too arrogant to look for. He stood up. He walked to the closet. He pulled out a black hoodie. It wasn't a costume. It was camouflage. He looked at the computer screen. He opened a browser and navigated to the most popular hero forum in Japan. He created a new account. Username, _might. No. He backspaced. Username Deku. He stared at the blinking cursor. Deku, he said softly. Useless. He typed it in. Username Deku. He started typing his first post. It was an analysis of a villain who had been evading police in the neighboring ward for weeks. The invisible looter. The police thought he was teleporting. Izuku knew he wasn't. He was using the sewer systems and a light refraction quirk that only worked in high humidity. Location prediction: North Muzidafu Drainage Junction, 2 a.m. tonight. Weakness: infrared goggles or flower bombs. Izuku hit post. He sat back. For the first time in 10 months, no, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a quirkless defect. He felt like a predator looking at a board game that everyone else was playing wrong. He wasn't a hero. He was never going to be All Might. But as he looked at the growing list of unsolved cases on the police database, Izuku Midoriya smiled. It wasn't a hero's smile. It was sharp, cold, and terrifyingly intelligent. Let's see who's really useless, he whispered. The classroom at Aldera High was a sensory deprivation tank of mediocrity. The fluorescent lights hummed a low, buzzing B-flat that grated against Izuku Midoriya's skull. The teacher, a man whose voice possessed the textural variety of unbuttered toast, was droning on about quadratic equations. Izuku stared at the blackboard, but the numbers were rearranging themselves in his mind. X equals b plus or minus square root, b superscript 2 4ac/2a. The formula dissolved. The x became a variable for velocity. The b became the tensile strength of a villain's webbing. The a was the angle of descent for a hero like Empty Lady. He looked down at his desk. Notebook number 14 sat there. It was a standard composition book, purchased from a convenience store for 100 yen. It lacked the burnt edges of number 13. It lacked the autograph of the number 1 hero. It was pristine, clinical, and unassuming, but the contents were not harmless. Where his previous notebooks had been fan letters written in graphite, glowing descriptions of super moves and costume designs, notebook number 14 was an autopsy report. Entry 44, the villain Gale Force. Quirk: pressurized air expulsion from pores on the forearms. Observed weakness: there is a 2.5 second lag between blasts if he uses both arms simultaneously. Likely a respiratory recharge requirement. If a hero times their approach during the inhale, he is defenseless. Izuku's pen hovered. He added a small footnote. Note: he favors his right side. An injury? Or habit? Check police reports from 20XX regarding a villain named Cyclone. Possible familial relation? Midoriya. Izuku snapped his head up. The class was looking at him. Not with the disdain they used to hold when Bakugo was here to lead the jeering, but with a sort of pitying indifference. The quirkless kid. The one who failed UA and came crawling back to the normal world. The answer to problem 3? The teacher asked. Izuku looked at the board. He hadn't heard the question. He glanced at the equation. X equals 4, sir, Izuku said automatically. Correct. Pay attention. The class turned back around. Izuku sank lower in his seat. It had been 3 months since the sludge incident. 3 months since the rooftop. 3 months since the rejection letter. He wasn't dead. He wasn't crying. He was simply existing. He attended school. He ate dinner with his mother, offering strained smiles to assure her he wasn't going to jump off a bridge. He did his homework. But the Izuku Midoriya who wanted to save the world with a smile. He was gone. In his place was something colder. Something quieter. Something that waited for the sun to go down so the real work could begin. The transition from day to night was Izuku's favorite time. As the orange glow of sunset faded into the bruised purple of twilight, the city of Muzidafu changed. The salarymen went home, the students dispersed, and the shadows stretched out to reclaim the streets. Izuku sat in his room. The All Might posters were gone, replaced by maps. He had printed out a high-resolution map of the Muzidafu district and taped it to the wall where the limited edition silver-aged poster used to be. Pushpins of different colors dotted the landscape. Red for violent crimes. Blue for petty theft. Green for hero patrol routes. He picked up a yellow pin. 2 muggings on 4th Street, he muttered, cross-referencing a police scanner app he had downloaded on his phone. It wasn't illegal to listen to unencrypted frequencies, though the police frowned upon it. And a break-in at the electronics store on 5th. He placed the pin. The heroes patrol the main avenue, Izuku whispered, tracing the green line with his finger. They stick to the lights. They stick to where the cameras are. But the villains, they know the shifts. He grabbed his gear. It wasn't a costume. Calling it a costume would imply he was playing a role. This was workwear. Black cargo pants with extra pockets. A dark green hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, breaking up his silhouette. A black medical mask to cover his freckles and mouth. A pair of cheap, heavy-duty boots he had found at a thrift store. And the binoculars. "I'm going out, Mom!" he called out, stopping by the kitchen. Inko looked up from her sewing. She looked tired. Her eyes lingered on his backpack, bulging with his notebook and a laptop. "The library again?" she asked, her voice laced with a fragile hope. "Yeah," Izuku lied effortlessly. He had gotten very good at lying. It was a survival mechanism. "I need to study for the midterms." "It's quiet there." "Okay, Izuku. Be safe. Don't stay out too late." "I won't." He walked out the door. He didn't go to the library. He took the train 3 stops over, to the Naruhata district, where the hero presence was thinner and the shadows were deeper. He wasn't a vigilante. Vigilantes fought. Vigilantes used quirks illegally. Izuku was just a boy who liked to watch. He climbed a fire escape, his movements practiced. For 3 months, he had done this every night. His grip strength had improved. His cardio was better. He moved silently across the rusted metal, pulling himself onto the roof of a 4-story office building. He lay on his stomach near the edge, the gravel digging into his elbows, and raised the binoculars. Below, the street was quiet. Too quiet. Target, the alleyway snatchers. Modus operandi, target lone salaryman. Quirk usage is minor, likely mild telekinesis or friction manipulation to trip victims. He adjusted the focus. There, in the mouth of an alley, 2 figures were lurking. They were smoking, the cherry of their cigarettes glowing in the dark. Izuku pulled out notebook number 14. He clicked his pen. 8:14 p.m. Suspects in position. They are waiting for the commuter rush from the late train to thin out. He waited. 10 minutes passed. A man in a suit walked by, looking at his phone. The figures moved. They didn't run, they slinked. Izuku watched, his breath held. One of the thugs reached out. The salaryman's briefcase suddenly jerked out of his hand, flying into the alley. The man shouted, startled. The second thug stepped out, brandishing a knife. Wallet and phone. Now, Izuku scanned the street. No heroes. No sirens. This was the reality All Might hadn't talked about on the roof. The gaps. The cracks in the pavement where people fell through. Izuku pulled out his phone. He opened a browser that routed through 3 different proxy servers, a trick he had learned from a tutorial on a hacker forum. He navigated to the local police tip line web form. Priority, active robbery. Location, alley between 4th and 5th, Naruhata. Suspects, 2 males. Quirk, short-range attraction telekinesis. Note, they are armed. He hit send. Then, he waited. 3 minutes later, a siren wailed. A patrol car screeched around the corner. The thugs panicked. The telekinetic one tried to pull a dumpster to block the alley, but the police were already out of the car, guns drawn. Police! Drop the weapon! Izuku watched the arrest. He watched the salaryman get his briefcase back. He watched the officers cuff the villains. He didn't feel a surge of triumph. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt the cold satisfaction of a mathematician who had balanced an equation. Solved, he thought. He packed his bag and melted back into the shadows. 1 down. The night was young. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi rubbed his temples. The headache was a permanent resident behind his eyes these days. The coffee in his mug was cold, sludge-like, and absolutely necessary. Report, he grunted. Sansa Tamakawa, the cat-headed officer, placed a stack of files on the desk. Clearance rates for petty theft and assault in the Muzutafu and Naruhata districts are up 15% this month, sir. Tsukachi blinked. 15? That's statistically improbable. Did Endeavor's agency expand their patrol routes? No, sir. In fact, hero patrols have been down due to the seasonal flu hitting the sidekick rosters. Then who is catching them? Sansa flipped the file open. The patrol officers are getting tips. Extremely accurate tips. Dispatch receives them via the web portal. They always specify the location, the nature of the crime, and this is the weird part, sir, the specific weaknesses of the perpetrator's quirk. Tsukachi sat up straighter. Show me. Sansa handed him a printout of a log. Tip 4092, suspect needlepoint. Quirk allows shooting quills from hair. Range is exactly 4 meters. Do not engage within that radius. Use riot shields. The officers followed the advice, Sansa said. They stayed at 5 meters and used tasers. Suspect was apprehended with 0 officer injuries. Tsukachi frowned. Who sent this? Anonymous proxy. We can't trace it. But... Sansa hesitated. There's a rumor online. On the Hero Talk forums, Tsukachi sighed. The fan boards? I don't have time for fan theories, Sansa. It's a specific thread, sir. It's called the Oracle. The user goes by the handle Deku. He posts analysis of cold cases. And lately, the tips were getting matched the style of his posts almost verbatim. Tsukachi opened his laptop. He typed in the URL. The forum was a chaotic mess of neon text and animated avatars, but the thread was pinned at the top of the Vigilante Watch section. Thread, the Oracle, analysis and sightings, user Deku, status online. Tsukachi scrolled. It was terrifying. There were maps. There were timelines. There were psychological profiles of villains that the police had been hunting for months. Post 144, regarding the sewer rat case. The police are looking in the wrong district. His quirk creates slime trails, which means he needs hydration. He's not in the industrial district. He's near the water treatment plant. Check the maintenance tunnels under Sector 7. Tsukachi grabbed his phone. He dialed the station chief in the neighboring precinct. Chief? It's Tsukachi. That slime guy you're hunting? Send a unit to the water treatment plant. Sector 7. Just trust me. He hung up. He refreshed the page. User Deku. Just doing what needs to be done. Knowledge is power, but only if you use it. This isn't a prophet, Tsukachi muttered, his lie-detecting intuition tingling even without a subject present. This is a profiler. A genius one. Is he a vigilante, sir? Sansa asked. Should we open a case? If he's out there fighting, he's breaking the law, Tsukachi said. But if he's just posting on a forum, technically, he's just a very observant citizen. But how does he know this stuff? He has to be on the scene. Tsukachi stared at the screen name. Deku. It sounded like a wooden doll. Or something useless. Open a file, Tsukachi said. Low priority for now. But I want to know who this is. Someone this smart. If they turn villain, we're in big trouble. Izuku sat in an internet cafe, the hood of his sweatshirt pulled up. The blue light of the monitor reflected in his tired eyes. He took a sip of melon soda. The forum was buzzing. All Might Fanba 99, dude, Deku is legit. The news just reported they caught the slime guy at the water plant. That was your call. Ingenium_rules, coincidence. No one can predict that stuff without a quirk. Dark Shadow, is Deku a pro-hero in disguise? Maybe Nizu? Izuku allowed himself a small, dry smile. Nizu. The smartest being on the planet. Being compared to him was intoxicating, he typed a reply. Deku not a hero. Just an observer. Heroes look at the villains. I look at the environment. He closed the tab. He opened his digital notebook. He had a new project. A bigger one. For the past week, he had noticed a pattern in the police radio chatter. Odd thefts. High-grade copper wiring. Industrial capacitors. A specific type of chemical coolant used in cryogenics. Separately, they were petty thefts. Together, they were a shopping list for a bomb. Or a machine. Izuku pulled up a map of the industrial district. He overlaid the theft locations. They formed a circle, and in the center of the circle was an abandoned warehouse owned by a defunct shipping company. What are you building? Izuku whispered. He shouldn't go. It was dangerous. The thieves were organized. They weren't muggers, they were professionals, but the police hadn't connected the dots. He had checked the public records. No investigation was open on a tech ring. They treated each theft as an isolated incident. If he didn't check, no one would. Consider the reality, All Might had said. The reality, Izuku muttered, packing up his bag, is that the police are overworked and understaffed. They need help. He paid for his time and left. The warehouse district smelled of rust and salt water. The wind whipped off the bay, cutting through Izuku's hoodie. He moved slowly. He had learned the hard way that gravel crunched louder than you expected. He stuck to the grass patches growing through the concrete. The warehouse in the center of his map was dark, but not empty. Izuku crouched behind a stack of shipping containers. He pulled out his binoculars. The windows were painted over, but there was a skylight on the roof. He looked at the drain pipe. It was rusted, precarious, risk assessment high. Structural integrity, questionable. He climbed it anyway. His hands shook as he pulled himself onto the corrugated metal roof. He crawled toward the skylight. He peered through the grime-encrusted glass. Below, the warehouse was lit by portable floodlights. There were 5 men. And a lot of equipment. The coolant is here, one man said. His voice carried up through the thin glass. He was big, bulky. Izuku noted the metallic sheen on his skin. Iron skin quirk? Or maybe titanium? Good, another voice said. A thin man in a lab coat. With this, the cryocannon will be stable. We can freeze the bank vault door in under 10 seconds. Izuku's blood ran cold. A cryocannon. They weren't building a bomb. They were building a siege weapon. They were planning a heist on a major bank. When do we strike? Tomorrow. Midday. When the shift changes at the Hero Agency down the street. Izuku fumbled for his notebook. He needed to write this down. He needed names, descriptions. He shifted his weight. Kriawak. The metal sheet under his knee groaned. It wasn't a subtle sound. It was the screech of old metal protesting existence. Below, the voices stopped. What was that? Roof. Check it. Izuku scrambled back. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his chest. Stupid. Stupid. You got too close. He slid down the drain pipe, scraping his palms raw. He hit the ground and ran. Hey! Someone's here! A blast of cold air hit the shipping container next to him. Frost bloomed instantly on the metal. The cryocannon. They were testing it. Izuku sprinted. He didn't look back. He dove behind a forklift just as another blast turned the air above him into snow. Find him. He saw the weapon. Izuku huddled in the dark. He was trapped. There were 5 of them. At least one had a ranged quirk. One had the cannon. He couldn't fight. He had 0 combat points. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it. Call the police? No time. They would ask for his name, his location. The dispatch time was 5 minutes minimum. He would be an ice sculpture by then. He needed a hero. Now, he opened the Hero Talk app. He checked the active patrols thread. Fans tracked heroes in real time. User, Fangirl77 posted, just saw Kamui Woods on 3rd Avenue. So cool, 3rd Avenue. That was 2 blocks away. Izuku didn't post on the forum. That was too slow. He did something reckless. He hacked the public announcement system of the warehouse district. It was an old system, intended for tsunami warnings, connected to the city grid. He had found the backdoor IP address weeks ago during a late-night boredom binge. He typed the command, broadcast on, source, text-to-speech. He typed furiously. Villain activity detected. Sector 4 warehouse. Cryogenic weaponry. Kamui Woods, requesting assistance. He hit enter. The speakers mounted on the poles outside screeched to life. The robotic voice boomed across the empty district, echoing off the metal walls. Villain activity detected. The villains froze. What the hell? The metal-skinned man shouted. Is that a police siren? It's the PA system. Someone hacked it. Forget the kid. Pack the gear. We have to go. Too late. A voice from above. Wooden tendrils shot down from the darkness, wrapping around the cannon. Kamui Woods landed on a stack of crates, posing dramatically. Lacquered chain prison. The wood expanded, snaking around the villains. The metal-skinned man tried to punch through, but Kamui was fast. He bound their arms, their legs. Who called it in? Kamui Woods shouted, looking around. I heard the PA. Izuku didn't answer. He was already running. He kept low, using the chaos to slip away into the labyrinth of shipping containers. He ran until his lungs burned. He ran until he was back at the train station, gasping for air, clutching his chest. He slumped onto a bench. People looked at him, a sweaty, dirty teenager in a hoodie, but they ignored him. He looked at his hands. They were covered in rust and grime. He had almost died. If that ice beam had hit him. But he smiled. A shaky, terrifying smile. He had stopped a bank heist. He had stopped a siege weapon. And he hadn't thrown a single punch. He pulled out notebook number 14. Entry 52, The Cryo Bandits. Defeated by Kamui Woods. Assist by the Oracle. The next morning, the news was all over it. Major heist foiled. The anchor announced. Kamui Woods apprehends 5 villains with high-tech weaponry. Police are baffled by the mysterious broadcast that alerted the hero. Izuku ate his toast. Inko was watching the TV. Ideally, the police should have better monitoring systems, Inko commented. It's scary that a hacker had to save the day. Yeah, Izuku said, chewing slowly. Scary. At school, the atmosphere was the same. Dull. Gray. But during lunch, Izuku sat alone in the stairwell. He opened his laptop. He had a private message on the forum. It wasn't from a fan. It wasn't from a troll. User Eraser. Subject analysis. Izuku's breath hitched. Eraser? As in Eraserhead? The underground hero? It couldn't be. He was an urban legend. He opened the message. Your analysis of the sewer rat was accurate. Your timing on the warehouse broadcast was reckless. You compromised your position. Next time, use a frequency that doesn't alert the villains to your presence. You got lucky. Izuku stared at the screen. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a stop what you're doing. It was advice. Izuku typed a reply, his fingers trembling. Deku, I don't have access to encrypted hero frequencies. I used what I had. A moment later, a reply came. Eraser, then get better tools. Or stop before you get killed. Logic dictates you won't survive another close call like that. Izuku closed the laptop. He leaned back against the concrete wall. Logic, he whispered. He pulled out notebook number 14. He turned to a blank page. He began to sketch. Not a hero. Not a villain. A gadget. A directional speaker that could project sound to a specific point without alerting the surroundings. If he was going to do this, if he was going to be the Oracle, he needed to upgrade. I need parts, he murmured. I need the beach. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The trash heap. He stood up. The bell rang. Izuku Midoriya walked back to class. But for the first time in months, he wasn't looking at his feet. He was looking ahead. He had a mentor, even if the mentor didn't know it yet. He had a mission, and he had notebook number 14, Police Headquarters. Musudafa Precinct. Tsukachi placed the file on the desk. You contacted him? He asked. Shota Aizawa stood in the corner, wrapped in his sleeping bag, looking like a heavily caffeinated caterpillar. I warned him, Aizawa grumbled. The kid is smart, but he has a death wish. Hacking a city PA system while sitting on the roof of the target building? It's irrational, but effective, Tsukachi pointed out. We recovered the cryo cannon. That thing could have killed dozens. Aizawa sipped a juice pouch. He's dangerous, Tsukachi. Not because he's a villain, but because he thinks he can play chess with live pieces. Who is he? We don't know yet. The IP bounces all over the world. But... Tsukachi tapped the file. The syntax. The vocabulary. The obsession with hero data. It reads like a student. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. A student? Or a fanba who washed out? Someone with something to prove. Aizawa scoffed. Great. A vigilante with a chip on his shoulder and a high IQ. My favorite demographic. Keep an eye on the forum, Eraser, Tsukachi said. If he escalates, we bring him in. If he escalates, Aizawa said, turning to leave, I'll arrest him myself. Before he gets himself killed. Aizawa walked out. But as he walked down the hall, he couldn't help but think about the analysis he had read in the sewer rat thread. Weakness, hydration dependency. It was the same observation Aizawa had made, but it had taken him 3 hours of surveillance. This Deku had figured it out from news clippings and a police scanner. Maybe, Aizawa thought, he's not just a fanboy. He checked his phone. A notification from the forum. Deku posted in Vigilante Watch. New thread, the hero killer stain. Analysis of movement patterns based on victim locations. Aizawa stopped walking. The hero killer. The pros were terrified of him. The police were baffled. And this internet user just started a thread on him? Aizawa opened the post. He read the first paragraph. His blood ran cold. Stain doesn't pick victims at random. He picks them based on media coverage density. He hunts where the cameras have recently been. He is hunting the fame, not just the heroes. Aizawa looked out the window at the setting sun. Don't do it, kid, he whispered. That one bites back. The night air in the Naruhata district tasted of ozone and stale frying oil. It was a cocktail of urban decay that Izuku Midoriya had grown strangely fond of over the last 3 months. He crouched on the edge of a water tower, the rusted metal cold against his palms through his fingerless gloves. His breath plumed in the chill air, disappearing into the darkness before it could rise. Below him, the city was a labyrinth of sodium lights and deep, ink-black shadows. Izuku checked his watch. 2:04 a.m. Most high school students were asleep. They were dreaming of exams, or crushes, or the latest hero debut. Izuku was dreaming, too, but his dreams were laid out on a grid of patrol routes and crime statistics. He adjusted the strap of his backpack. It was heavier tonight. Inside, nestled between notebook number 14 and a thermal blanket, were 3 spheres about the size of tennis balls. They were crude, ugly things. Plastic casings filled with magnesium powder and an oxidizer he'd scraped from sparklers, fitted with a friction igniter he'd salvaged from emergency flares. Flashbangs. Mark-I. Mayhatsum, the eccentric support course student he'd met online while hunting for obscure parts, called them babies. Izuku called them last resorts. He hoped he wouldn't have to use them. He wasn't a fighter. He was a ghost. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to watch him. The rumors on the underground forums had been specific. There was a turf war brewing between a new Yakuza offshoot and the local street gangs. The police were spread thin, but the forums whispered of a shadow that moved through the district, a hero who hated the press and fought like a demon. Eraserhead. Izuku had spent 2 weeks building a profile on the underground hero. It was difficult. There was no merchandise, no fan club, no televised interviews. Only blurry photos taken by terrified civilians and hushed stories from villains who woke up in jail cells with broken bones. Quirk, erasure. Nullifies emitter and transformation quirks upon visual contact. Cancelled by blinking. Fighting style, close quarters combat. Uses a capture weapon made of steel wire alloy? Carbon fiber? Izuku tapped his fingers against his knee. He wanted to see it. He needed to verify the data. If he could understand how a hero fought without a flashy quirk, maybe he could understand how to survive without one at all. A flicker of movement caught his eye. 3 blocks down. An alleyway that cut behind a derelict pachinko parlor. The streetlights there had been smashed. Izuku raised his binoculars. Figures were moving in the dark. Not the erratic, shuffling movement of drunks or junkies. This was precise. They were positioning themselves. One figure climbed a fire escape, prone on the rusted landing. A sniper? No, he held no rifle. An emitter type. 2 more hid behind a dumpster. Another, a massive hulk of a man with spikes protruding from his shoulders, stood openly in the center of the alley, acting as bait. It's an ambush, Izuku realized, his heart skipping a beat. They're hunting someone. He scanned the perimeter. The kill box was perfect. Anyone walking into that alley would focus on the big guy. The moment they engaged, the ones behind the dumpster would flank, and the one on the fire escape would have a clear shot at the back of the head. Who are they waiting for? A silence fell over the street. It was the heavy, pregnant silence of a held breath. Then footsteps. Soft, rhythmic footsteps echoing against the brick walls. A man turned the corner. He looked unassuming, slouching posture, messy black hair, dressed in dark, baggy clothing and a scarf that looked too thick for the weather. Izuku gasped. Eraserhead. The hero was walking straight into the trap. He doesn't know, Izuku thought, panic flaring in his chest. The street light is out. He can't see the ones behind the dumpster. Izuku's hand went to his pocket. His phone. He could call the police. Dispatch time, 8 minutes. The ambush triggers in seconds. He could yell. If I yell, I give away my position. The guy on the fire escape might have a range quirk. He could kill me. Fear, cold and rational, gripped him. Don't get involved. You are an observer. You are 0 points. But his eyes were glued to the scene. Eraserhead stopped. He was 10 feet from the bait. You're far from home, hero, the spiked villain growled, his voice carrying in the quiet night. Eraserhead didn't speak. He just sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the very act of fighting was a bureaucratic inconvenience. Get him! The trap sprung. The two villains behind the dumpster lunged. One had hands that glowed with searing white heat. The other could elongate his fingers into razor-sharp whips. From above, the fire escape villain unleashed a barrage of hardened slime projectiles. It happened in a split second, and in that split second, Izuku moved. He didn't jump down. He wasn't suicidal. He scrambled along the rooftop, his boots skidding on the gravel, positioning himself directly above the alley. Below, the battle had joined. Eraserhead was fast. Inhumanly fast. As the glowing villain lunged, Aizawa's hair shot up. His eyes glowed red. The villain's hands sputtered and died. Aizawa wrapped his capture scarf around the man's wrist, used the momentum to swing him into the whip villain, and ducked under the slime projectiles. He's incredible, Izuku thought, his mind racing to keep up. He erased the heat quirk instantly. But he can't erase the mutant type. The spiked Hulk charged. Aizawa dodged, but the alley was narrow. The spiked villain was a mutant type. Erasure wouldn't work on the physical spikes, only on any secondary emitter abilities he might have. Aizawa was forced back, parrying a blow that cracked the pavement. Can't erase these, can you? The Hulk laughed, swinging a massive fist. Aizawa leaped back, landing on a trash can. But he had lost his rhythm. He was checking the fire escape, checking the Hulk, checking the two recovering villains on the ground. 4 targets. 1 set of eyes. Izuku saw it before Aizawa did. The villain on the fire escape wasn't just shooting slime. He was signaling. A 5th villain was emerging from the sewer grate behind Aizawa, a stealth type. Chameleon skin. He was effectively invisible against the wet pavement. He held a knife. Aizawa was focused forward. The knife was inches from his hamstring. He's going to die. The thought wasn't a question. It was a calculation. Aizawa was overwhelmed. He was managing the 4 in front, but the 5th was the checkmate. Izuku didn't think. He didn't consult the flow chart in his head. He reached into his bag, grabbed a sphere, ripped the friction cord, and threw it. Close your eyes. Izuku screamed, his voice cracking with puberty and terror. The shout echoed in the alley. Aizawa didn't hesitate. A veteran's instinct overruled confusion. He squeezed his eyes shut and dropped into a defensive crouch. The villains, however, looked up. Bang! A flash of magnesium white light tore through the darkness, brighter than a lightning strike. The sound was a deafening concussion that rattled the windows of the pachinko parlor. Gah! My eyes! What the hell? The villains staggered, blinded, clutching their faces. The chameleon villain behind Aizawa recoiled, his camouflage flickering as his concentration broke, revealing a scaly, green form. 6 o'clock. Invisible type. Knife. Izuku screamed from the roof. Aizawa's eyes snapped open. He spun low, his capture scarf lashing out like a viper. It wrapped around the chameleon villain's ankle. With a brutal tug, he slammed the villain into the wall, knocking him unconscious. The sniper on the fire escape. Izuku shouted, his voice trembling but clear. He has a 3-second cooldown after a volley. He's reloading now. Aizawa didn't look up at the roof. He looked at the fire escape. His hair floated. Red eyes locked onto the slime shooter. The villain tried to fire, but nothing came out. Aizawa launched himself off the dumpster, his scarf snagging the fire escape railing. He swung up, kicking the sniper in the chest, sending him crashing through the rusted metal to the ground below. The big guy! Izuku yelled, peering over the edge. His spikes are keratin. They're brittle at the joints. Hit the elbows. The spiked Hulk roared, rubbing his eyes, swinging blindly. Where are you? I'll kill you! Aizawa dropped from the fire escape, landing silently behind the Hulk. He didn't try to punch the spikes. He targeted the inside of the elbow, where the armor was thinnest. A precise, surgical strike. Crack! The Hulk screamed, his arm going limp. Aizawa followed up with a capture weave, binding the massive villain's legs and toppling him like a felled tree. The remaining two villains, the heat user and the whip user, were recovering from the flashbang. They looked at their fallen comrades. They looked at the demonic hero standing amidst the bodies, his hair floating, his eyes glowing. They looked at the darkness above, where the voice was coming from. Police are 3 minutes out. Izuku bluffed, checking his watch. It was actually 6 minutes. Run and you might make it. They didn't run. They hesitated. And hesitation in front of Eraserhead was defeat. Aizawa closed the distance. 2 swift strikes to the solar plexus. 2 unconscious bodies hitting the wet concrete. Silence returned to the alley. Izuku lay flat on the roof, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He pressed his face into the gravel. I did it. I helped. He waited for the adrenaline to subside. He needed to leave. He needed to vanish before the police arrived. He crawled backward, inch by inch, trying to be silent. Don't move. The voice was right beside him. Izuku froze. His blood turned to ice. He slowly looked up. Standing on the edge of the water tower, looming over him like a gargoyle, was Eraserhead. He hadn't heard him climb up. He hadn't heard a sound. The hero's goggles were around his neck. His eyes were dark, tired, and utterly terrifying. The capture weapon floated lazily around his shoulders, like a snake tasting the air. Izuku squeaked. Stand up, Aizawa commanded. Low. Dangerous. Izuku scrambled to his feet. His knees knocked together. He was wearing his green hoodie, the hood pulled tight, a black mouth mask covering the lower half of his face. He looked like a delinquent, a suspicious, trespassing delinquent. Aizawa stepped forward. Who are you? Nobody, Izuku whispered. Just observing. Observing, Aizawa repeated flatly. He glanced at the alley below, then back at Izuku. You threw a flashbang. Homemade. Dangerous. Unlicensed use of support items. It saved you, Izuku said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. I had it under control. No, you didn't, Izuku said. The analysis took over. The fear was there, but the need to be correct was stronger. You didn't see the chameleon type. He was in your blind spot. The sensory overload from the 4 visible targets distracted you. Your blink interval was approaching. You were going to take a knife to the hamstring, which would have compromised your mobility, leading to capture or death. Silence stretched between them. The wind howled softly through the water tower struts. Aizawa stared at the boy. He was small. Trembling. But his eyes, the eyes visible above the mask, were manic, intelligent, and fiercely honest. Take off the mask, Aizawa said. Izuku hesitated. Now. Or I take you in for obstruction of justice and vigilantism. Izuku reached up with shaking hands. He pulled down the mask. He lowered the hood. Aizawa blinked. He expected a villain. A seasoned vigilante. Maybe a rogue support student. He saw a child. A plain-looking boy with messy green hair and freckles, looking like he was about to vomit from anxiety. You're a kid, Aizawa stated, his voice losing some of its edge, replaced by a weary confusion. High school. Izuku nodded. What are you doing on a roof in Narahata at 2 a.m. with illegal explosives? I wanted to see, Izuku stammered. I analyze heroes. And villains. I want to help. You want to play hero, Aizawa corrected harshly. You want to die? No. Izuku balled his hands into fists. I know I can't fight. I know I'm useless in a brawl. That's why I stayed on the roof. That's why I used the flashbang. I calculated the blast radius. I knew you had the goggles to shield your eyes if I warned you. Calculated? Aizawa stepped closer. He reached out. Izuku flinched, expecting a hit. Aizawa snatched the notebook from Izuku's backpack side pocket. Notebook number 14. Hey! That's mine! Aizawa ignored him. He flipped it open. He expected drawings. Fan scribbles. He stopped at page 40. Eraserhead. It was all there. A diagram of his capture weapon mechanics. An estimate of his dry eye duration relative to humidity. A psychological profile based on his target selection. Weakness, prolonged combat against multiple heteromorphic types. Reliance on stealth. If stealth is broken, defensive capability drops by 40%. Recommendation: use smoke or flash agents to reset stealth parameters during group engagements. Aizawa read the entry. It was clinical. It was invasive. It was brilliantly accurate. He looked at the boy. You wrote this? Yes. How? I watch. I read the forums. I connect the dots. Aizawa flipped to another page. Auntie Lady? Kamui Woods. The sludge villain. Every entry had weaknesses highlighted in red ink. It was a manual on how to kill heroes. Or how to save them. Aizawa closed the book. He tapped it against his leg. You're the one from the forum, Aizawa said. Deku. Izuku paled. You read it? I read the tip about the warehouse. You hacked a PA system. I had to. They had a cryo-cannon, and tonight? You intervened. You were going to die, Izuku said again, his voice small but firm. I couldn't just watch. Aizawa looked at the boy. He saw the trembling legs. He saw the terror. But he also saw the resolve. The kid wasn't seeking glory. He wasn't jumping down to punch the villain and pose for cameras. He was operating purely on logic and a desperate need to preserve life. It was rational. Dangerous, illegal, but rational. Aizawa sighed. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Do you have a quirk, kid? Izuku looked down at his shoes. The red sneakers scuffed against the gravel. No, he whispered. I'm quirkless. Aizawa paused. The pieces clicked into place. The flashbangs. The distance. The desperate over-preparation. The analysis. This kid was compensating. He was trying to bridge the gap between 0 and 1 with pure intellect. Aizawa remembered his own youth. The teachers telling him his quirk wasn't flashy enough. The struggle to learn the capture cloth because looking at things wasn't enough to save them. He looked at the notebook again. If I take you in, Aizawa said slowly, you'll be expelled from whatever school you go to. You'll have a record. You'll never work in law enforcement or heroics. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. I know, but if I let you go, you're going to keep doing this. Aren't you? Izuku opened his eyes. He looked straight at Aizawa. Yes. Someone has to see what the heroes miss. Aizawa held the gaze. It was a stubborn, stupid, heroic gaze. You have 0 combat training, Aizawa said. Your stance is terrible. You breathe too loud. If that sniper had looked up 10 seconds earlier, you would be a stain on this roof. Izuku flinched. Your analysis is good, Aizawa continued, his tone dry. Terrifyingly good. But dead analysts are useless. He held out the notebook. Izuku stared at it. He reached out slowly, taking it as if it were a bomb. Go home, Aizawa said. Izuku blinked. What? Go home. Before the police get here and I have to explain why I'm bullying a quirkless teenager. You're letting me go? I'm exercising discretion, Aizawa muttered. He turned his back to Izuku, looking down at the alley where the police sirens were finally wailing in the distance. But listen to me closely, Deku. Izuku stood at attention. You were right tonight. I was careless. You saved me. I hate being in debt. Aizawa glanced over his shoulder. His eyes glowed red for a brief second, emphasizing the weight of his words. But the streets aren't a math problem. Variables change. People die. If you're going to walk this path without power, you need more than just a notebook. He pointed a finger at Izuku. Don't let them catch you. And don't get yourself killed. If I find your body in a gutter, I'll be very annoyed. Izuku stared, wide-eyed. It wasn't praise. It wasn't an offer of training. It was a grim warning from a man who knew the darkness intimately. Yes, sir. Izuku squeaked. Get out of here. Aizawa jumped off the roof, his capture cloth snagging a lamppost as he descended to deal with the police. Izuku stood alone on the water tower. The wind whipped his hair. He clutched notebook number 14 to his chest. He hadn't been arrested. Eraserhead, the most cynical, logical hero in the underground, had read his analysis and let him go. He listened, Izuku thought. He didn't tell me to be a policeman. He didn't tell me to give up. He told me to survive. A strange sensation bubbled up in his chest. It wasn't the explosive joy of All Might's smile. It was a quiet, burning ember of validation. Izuku pulled his mask back up. He checked the fire escape route on the other side of the building. More than a notebook, he whispered to himself, repeating Aizawa's words. He looked at his hands. Soft. Weak. I need to get better, he said. I need to be faster. Quieter. He vanished into the night, slipping down the fire escape like a shadow. 1 hour later. The Tsukachi residence. Aizawa sat on the detective's couch, holding an ice pack to his bruised shoulder. The spiked villain had gotten one good hit in before the end. Tsukachi handed him a cup of coffee. So? The report says anonymous tipster neutralized the sensory advantage of the villains. Yeah, Aizawa grunted. Was it him? The Oracle guy? Aizawa took a sip of the coffee. It was black, bitter, and perfect. It was a kid, Tsukachi. The detective paused. A kid? Like a Yui student? No. Younger. Smaller. Quirkless. Tsukachi's eyes widened. Quirkless? And he took down a sniper? He threw a flash bang and shouted instructions. He analyzed my fight in real time. He knew my blink intervals better than I do. Aizawa set the cup down. He looked at his own hand. He could still feel the phantom sensation of the knife that would have severed his hamstring if the kid hadn't screamed. He's reckless, Aizawa said. He's terrified. He shakes like a leaf. But he stepped in when the pros failed. He has the spirit. Just not the hardware. Did you get a name? Deku, Tsukachi sighed. We have to bring him in, Shota. A quirkless kid running around with explosives? It's a tragedy waiting to happen. I know, Aizawa said. He leaned back, closing his eyes. That's why I didn't arrest him tonight. That logic makes no sense. If I arrest him, the system chews him up. He gets a record. He gets barred from support courses. He stops being useful and starts being a victim. Aizawa opened one eye. I gave him a warning. I want to see what he does with it. If he's smart, and he is terrifyingly smart, he'll realize he's unprepared. He'll evolve. And if he doesn't, then I'll bring him in next time, Aizawa said. But for tonight, let the kid have the win. He saved my life. Aizawa reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small piece of paper he had swiped from the kid's open backpack while taking the notebook. It was a receipt for a hardware store in the Dagoba district. Midoriya. Keep the file open, Tsukachi, Aizawa said, crushing the receipt in his hand. But mark it as potential asset. Midoriya apartment. Izuku sat at his desk. It was 4 a.m. He couldn't sleep. He opened notebook number 14 to a fresh page. Entry, self-correction. Incident, the Narahata ambush. Performance, adequate. Tactical assessment was correct. Execution was sloppy. Errors, loud breathing. Poor stealth discipline. Panic response time too slow. Throwing arm weak. Flashbang nearly missed the optimal detonation zone. He picked up a pen. He wrote in bold letters. Required upgrades. 1. Physical conditioning. Cardiovascular endurance needs to double. Parkour training for vertical mobility. 2. Stealth gear. The boots are too loud. Need rubber soles. The hoodie catches the wind. Need streamlined armor. 3. Gadgets. Flashbangs are good, but limited. Need smoke. Need grappling gear. Aizawa's style is efficient. Need a voice modulator. Voice cracking is unprofessional and identifiable. He looked at the computer screen. The image of the beach filled with trash, Mei Hatsum's hunting ground, was on the screen. Mei, Izuku muttered. I need to ask her about carbon fiber. He looked at the All Might figure in the box in the corner. Then he looked at the sketch of Eraserhead in his notebook. All Might had told him to give up. Eraserhead had told him to get better. Izuku closed the notebook with a snap. I won't die, he promised the empty room. I'll become the ghost that haunts the villain's nightmares. He turned off the lamp. The darkness didn't feel as scary anymore. It felt like a cover. It felt like home. The classroom of 1A was silent, but not the focused silence of scholars. It was the silence of strangers sharing an elevator. 19 students sat in their seats. The 20th desk, located in the back row near the window, was occupied by a boy named Koji Koda, who spoke to no one. But there was a spectral gap in the room, a phantom limb sensation that none of them could quite name, except for one. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, his eyes fixed on the clouds drifting past the window. He was scowling, which was his default setting, but the fire behind the scowl was dim. It was a smoldering coal rather than a raging inferno. Usually, this was the time of day he would be yelling. He would be turning around, blasting a small explosion into a nervous, green-haired nerd's face, telling him to stop muttering, to stop breathing, to stop existing. It had been his routine for 10 years. A twisted ecosystem of predator and prey, but the prey was gone. Deku hadn't applied to UA. Or maybe he had, and he'd failed so spectacularly he hadn't even made the registry. Bakugo didn't know. He hadn't seen the nerd since the sludge incident. Since the day Bakugo had looked into the crowd, dying, and seen Deku just standing there, freezing. Coward, Bakugo thought, gritting his teeth. He finally learned his place. He realized he's nothing. It should have been a victory. Bakugo had won. He was at the top hero school, the undisputed king of his middle school, on the fast track to surpassing All Might. The pebble in his path had been kicked aside, so why did he feel so bored? Remove your feet from the desk. Bakugo shifted his eyes. Tenya Ida, the class representative, was chopping the air with his hand. He was stiff, robotic, and annoying. It is disrespectful to the UA upperclassmen who used this desk before you. Ida boomed. Bakugo didn't yell back. He didn't threaten to kill him. He just slowly lowered his legs, let out a scoff that sounded more tired than aggressive, and turned his head away. Whatever, 4 eyes. Ida blinked, surprised by the lack of resistance. He adjusted his glasses, looking unsure of how to proceed without a conflict to manage. Across the room, Ochako Uraraka stared at her notebook. She chewed on the end of her pen nervously. She felt drifted. During the entrance exam, she had been saved by the boy with glasses, Ida. He had pulled her from the rubble efficiently, like a machine. She had thanked him, and he had nodded and lectured her on situational awareness. There had been no emotional connection. No boy with a broken arm staring at her with determination. Just a professional rescue. She looked around the class. Everyone seemed so strong. Yayorozu was a genius. Todoroki was a powerhouse. Bakugo was terrifying. Do I belong here? Uraraka thought, her stomach twisting. I barely scraped by with rescue points. I can't even fight. The door slid open. Shota Aizawa shuffled in. He looked more tired than usual. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a subtle limp in his step, a souvenir from a night in Narahata dealing with a sniper on a fire escape. Everyone, sit down, Aizawa muttered, dropping his sleeping bag behind the podium. Today, we're doing foundational hero training. The class perked up. This was it. Combat? Strategy? Aizawa held up a card that read rescue, disaster relief, shipwreck, fire, landslide. You'll be dealing with all of it. It's a field trip. Excitement rippled through the room. However, Aizawa added, his dark eyes scanning the rows of students. He paused when he looked at the empty spaces in their cohesion. He saw a group of individuals, not a team. He thought of the vigilante kid Deku. That kid, alone on a roof, had more situational awareness than this entire class of elite prospects combined. Don't get cocky, Aizawa warned, his voice low. The world isn't a classroom. In the real world, you don't get a passing grade for trying. You survive, or you don't. The chill in the room deepened. Get your costumes. Meet at the bus ride. The bus to the unforeseen simulation joint, USJ, was a quiet affair. The seating arrangement was haphazard. Tsuyu Ajui sat next to Minoru Mineta. She looked at the small, purple boy who was shaking with excitement about the girls' costumes. You're gross, Tsuyu said bluntly. I'm just appreciating the aesthetics of heroism. Mineta defended, sweating. There was no buffer. In another timeline, a green-haired boy would have been sitting between them, nervously mediating, turning the conversation toward quirk analysis, bridging the gap between the weirdos and the cool kids. Without him, the social circles were rigid bubbles. Bakugo sat near the back, arms crossed. Eijiro Kirishima sat across from him. Hey Bakugo, Kirishima said, grinning. Your gauntlets are insane. What's the max output? Enough to kill you, Bakugo muttered, not making eye contact. Man, so manly. But seriously, we should spar sometime. Not interested in fighting extras. Kirishima's smile faltered slightly. Right. Extras. Near the front, Uraraka sat next to Ida. I'm nervous, she admitted softly. There is no need for anxiety, Ida stated, looking straight ahead. Mr. Aizawa is a professional. The facility is state-of-the-art. We simply need to follow instructions and execute our training. Right, Uraraka said, shrinking into her seat. Execute training? Don't mess up. Don't be a burden. The bus jolted. We're here, Aizawa called out. Quiet down. They filed off the bus. The massive dome of the USJ loomed ahead. 13, the space hero, was waiting for them. The speech about quirks being dangerous was delivered. It was inspiring. Uraraka felt a momentary lift in her spirits. Yes. Power to save. That's why I'm here. Then, the lights flickered. A grinding noise echoed through the plaza. The fountain in the center sputtered. Aizawa spun around. He felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was the same sensation he felt in Narahata, but magnified 1,000 times. A purple vortex swirled into existence at the base of the central stairs. It expanded, tearing a hole in reality. A hand reached out. Pale, dry skin, covered in severed hands. Shigaraki Tamura stepped into the light. Behind him, a sea of darkness spilled out. Dozens, then hundreds of villains poured into the USJ. They looked like a nightmare parade, thugs, mutants, giants, and beside Shigaraki stood the Noma. A towering monstrosity of beak and muscle, its brain exposed to the air. Eraserhead and 13, Shigaraki rasped, scratching his neck. According to the schedule we received the other day, All Might should be here. The students froze. Villains? Kaminari squeaked. Like real villains? This is part of the test, right? Don't move! Aizawa shouted, snapping his goggles over his eyes. 13. Protect the students. Aizawa didn't waste time analyzing. He couldn't. There were too many. He thought of the notebook. Notebook number 14. Weakness. Prolonged combat against multiple heteromorphic types. There are too many, Aizawa whispered. But I have no choice. He leaped down the stairs. Sensei! Ida shouted. You can't fight them all alone. Your style is, you can't be a hero with only one trick, Aizawa yelled back, already engaging the first wave. He swept the legs of 3 villains, erasing the quirks of 2 more. He was a whirlwind of capture tape and violence. But he was one man. And he was alone. Scatter them, Shigaraki ordered Kurojiri. The mist expanded. No! 13 raised a finger, ready to use black hole. But Kurojiri was faster. He warped behind 13. A pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. The purple fog engulfed the students. Uraraka! Grab my hand! Ida yelled, but Uraraka was paralyzed by fear. She saw the void opening beneath her. She reached out, but her fingers brushed empty air. The class vanished. The shipwreck zone. Splash. Mineta hit the water screaming, I'm gonna die. I can't swim. I mean I can, but not in a villain's pool. Tsuyu Ezri landed gracefully next to him, paddling, treading water. Quiet, Mineta. They'll hear us. They know we're here. Mineta shrieked, pointing. Surrounding the boat were sharks. Not literal sharks, but villains with aquatic quirks. They circled the wreckage, waiting. Little Froggy, one villain hissed, his jaw unhinging. Come down here and play. Tsuyu and Mineta scrambled onto the deck of the sinking ship. What do we do? What do we do? Mineta hyperventilated, throwing purple balls randomly into the water. They floated harmlessly. Tsuyu looked at the villains. There were at least 10 of them. We need a plan, Suya said, her voice trembling slightly. My quirk lets me jump and swim. Yours sticks things. So what? If I carry you, I can jump over them. You can't jump that far. They'll catch us in the air. That guy has a water cannon quirk. Mineta pointed at a villain charging up a massive hydroblast. In another world, a strategic mind would have seen the synergy. A whirlpool. Trap them together. Use the environment. But Izuka wasn't here. We have to hide, Mineta decided. He scrambled into the ship's cabin. We hide until All Might comes. Mineta, wait. The ship is sinking. I don't care. I'm not going out there. Tsuya looked at the water. The villains were getting impatient. They aren't coming down, the shark villain said. Sink the boat faster. A villain with giant crab claws smashed the hull. The ship groaned and tilted sharply. Tsuya grabbed Mineta by the collar. We have to move. No. Crack. The ship split. Water rushed in. Tsuya was thrown against the wall, hitting her head. Her vision swam. Azuri! Mineta screamed. The villains boarded the sinking wreckage. Gotcha, the crab villain sneered, raising a claw. Tsuya blinked, blood running into her eye. She lashed out with her tongue, wrapping it around Mineta and throwing him toward the shore zone. Run! She croaked. Get her! Tsuya dove into the water. It was her element, but there were too many of them. A hand grabbed her ankle. Another grabbed her arm. She was dragged down into the dark. She struggled, kicking, but she was overwhelmed. I'm sorry, she thought. I'm not strong enough. Suddenly, the water around them froze. Todoroki Shoto stood on the shore, his hand touching the surface. Ice spread like a glacier, trapping the villains instantly. He looked bored. Pathetic. He didn't see Tsuyu under the water. He had frozen the surface. Tsuyu gasped, trapping in an air pocket beneath the ice. She was safe from the villains, but she was trapped. She banged on the ice from below. Todoroki turned and walked away. He assumed the villains were the only ones in the water. Tsuyu watched his blurry silhouette walk away. Her lungs burned. The central plaza. Aizawa was dying. It wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow dismantling of a human being. He had fought bravely. He had taken down 20, maybe 30 villains. But the fatigue was setting in. His eyes were dry. His muscles screamed, and Shigaraki was watching. Counting. 24 seconds, Shigaraki muttered. 23. Aizawa erased the villain's quirk and punched him. But as he turned, Shigaraki was there. You're so cool, Eraserhead, Shigaraki whispered. Aizawa looked up. He tried to erase Shigaraki's quirk. But his hair fell. A blink. Shigaraki's hand touched Aizawa's elbow. Decay. Flesh turned to dust. Muscle disintegrated. Bone crumbled. Aizawa screamed, a raw, guttural sound that echoed through the dome. Don't strain yourself, Shigaraki laughed. Noma, the beast moved. It was faster than the eye could follow. It grabbed Aizawa's head and slammed it into the concrete. The sound was like a melon being dropped from a roof. Blood pooled. Sensei. In the distance, at the entrance, Ida and Uraraka had managed to stay together. They were fighting Kurojairi, or rather, avoiding him. I need to get help. Ida yelled. Uraraka, make me float. I can't reach you. Uraraka cried, dodging a warp gate. He's too fast. Without the coordinated distraction, Kurojairi was focusing entirely on the escapee. You are the engine, Kurojairi said calmly. You are the threat. A warp gate opened directly in front of Ida as he sprinted. He couldn't stop. He ran straight into it, and emerged, back in the center of the plaza, right in front of the Noma. Ida skidded to a halt. He looked up. The beast was holding Aizawa's broken body. It turned its beakless face toward Ida. Oh? Shigaraki scratched his neck. A student? A game over screen for the speedster. The Noma dropped Aizawa. It raised a fist. Ida froze. The engine in his legs stalled. I'm going to die. Smash! The doors of the USJ exploded. Smoke billowed. A figure stood there, not wearing a suit, but a white dress shirt, tie loosened. He wasn't smiling. I am here. The voice wasn't comforting. It was furious. All Might vanished. He reappeared in front of Ida, catching the Noma's fist. The shockwave shattered the windows of the dome. Get Aizawa to safety, All Might growled. Now, Ida scrambled back, grabbing his teacher's limp body. Aizawa's arm was hanging by a thread of skin. His face was a mask of blood. All Might. Ida gasped. Go! All Might threw the Noma back. He engaged. But something was wrong. All Might was slower. He had spent his time commuting. He had wasted minutes resolving 3 incidents on the way here. His limit was already blinking red. The Noma absorbed his punches. Shock absorption. It's no use, Shigaraki cackled. He's the anti-symbol of peace. You're getting weaker, All Might. Usually, this was the moment Izuku Midoriya would have analyzed the situation. He would have noticed the shock absorption. He would have shouted, he's absorbing it. You have to blow him away, or target the brain, but there was no voice. Only the sound of fists hitting meat. All Might fought with brute force. He pummeled the creature. 100%. 100%. 100%. Steam poured off his body. He was coughing blood. The Noma grappled him. Its claws dug into All Might's weak spot, the scar. Ga! All Might faltered. Kurogyri, Shigaraki ordered. Cut him in half. The warp gate began to close around All Might's waist. No! Bakugo launched himself from the ruins zone. He had blasted his way here. Get off him! Bakugo fired an explosion at Kurogyri's metal neck brace. It connected. Kurogyri wavered. Kirishima! Todoroki! Bakugo yelled. Help me! Kirishima hardened and charged Shigaraki. Todoroki sent a wave of ice at the Noma. They were strong. But they were uncoordinated. Todoroki's eyes froze the Noma's right side, including the arm holding All Might. All Might used the chance to rip himself free, tearing a chunk of his own shirt and skin in the process. Plus, Ultra! All Might delivered a punch that defied physics. He didn't just hit the Noma. He hit the air behind it, launching the creature through the roof of the USJ. The villain was gone, but All Might fell to his knees. The steam was thick. He was reverting. Shigaraki stood up, furious. You cheated. You cheated. He looked at the students. Bakugo. Todoroki. Kirishima. If I can't kill the symbol, I'll kill the seeds. Shigaraki lunged at Bakugo. He was fast. Bakugo raised his gauntlet, but he was slow on the draw. He's going to touch me. A hand reached out. Bang! A bullet passed through Shigaraki's hand. Snipe. The pros had arrived. Not because Ida ran for help, but because All Might had pressed his emergency beacon the moment he entered the building. But they were late. Shigaraki recoiled, clutching his bleeding hand. Game over. Back to the start screen. Kurogyri wrapped around him. They vanished. The aftermath. The sirens were blue and red, painting the faces of Class 1A in sickly hues. They sat on the pavement outside the USJ. Blankets were draped over their shoulders. Tsuyu sat apart from the others. She was shivering, wrapped in 2 thermal blankets. She had been trapped under the ice for 3 minutes before Todoroki realized she was there and melted it. Her lips were blue. She looked traumatized. Mineta was sobbing uncontrollably into a medic's chest. Bakugo stared at the ground. He held his left arm. Shigaraki hadn't touched him, but the phantom sensation of death lingered. I didn't do anything, Bakugo thought. All Might had to save me. I was just in the way. He looked at Aizawa being loaded into an ambulance. The man looked like a pile of raw meat. The paramedics were shouting about massive cranial trauma and permanent nerve damage. Uraraka sat next to Ida. Ida was staring at his hands. I couldn't run, Ida whispered. I'm the engine, and I stalled. I was too scared to float you, Uraraka confessed, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Ida-kun. I'm so sorry. There was no we survived. Cheer. There was no bonding over victory. They had been massacred. They had survived by the grace of All Might, and the cost was their teacher's body and their own innocence. Tsukachi walked among them, taking statements. He looked grim. It was an intelligence failure, he said to Sansa. No one saw this coming. A huge organization like this, how did they hide? Musudafu. Midoriya apartment. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of 3 computer monitors. Izuku Midoriya sat in his chair. He was wearing his Deku hoodie, but the hood was down. On the center screen, the news was playing. Catastrophe at UA High. Villain League infiltration. All Might injured? Eraserhead in critical condition. Izuku watched the footage taken from a news helicopter. He saw the hole in the dome. He saw the students huddling outside. He zoomed in on a frame. A blurry shot of Shigaraki retreating into the portal. He saw the hand on the face. Izuku's breath hitched. He opened a folder on his computer labeled Unverified Rumors. 3 days ago. A post on a deep web forum about a gamer looking for recruits in the underworld. Someone asking for cannon fodder to raid a castle. Izuku had seen it. He had read it, and he had scrolled past it. He had dismissed it as slang. He had focused on staying. He had focused on the petty crimes in Naruhata. I missed it, Izuku whispered. He grabbed his hair. I missed it. I missed it. I missed it. He looked at Aizawa's face on the news report. Critical condition. The man who had spared him on the roof. The man who had told him to survive. Because Izuku had been too focused on the small picture, the big picture had almost killed everyone he used to know. He looked at Bakugo in the footage. Bakugo looked broken. Small. Izuku felt a wave of nausea. Knowledge is power, he recited, his voice shaking with rage. But only if you use it. He hadn't used it. He slammed his fist onto the desk. A coffee mug rattled. He pulled up the image of Shigaraki again. Quirk analysis. Touch-based disintegration. Needs 5 fingers. Weakness, long-range attacks. Speed. Breaking the fingers. Izuku started typing. He typed faster than he ever had before. He was creating a new file. A new obsession. Target, the League of Villains. Objective, dismantle. He wasn't just a watcher anymore. This was personal. He stood up and walked to his closet. He pulled out the box of parts he had scavenged from the beach. May, he said aloud. I need that meeting. He needed gear. He needed to be out there. Not just in the shadows of Naruhata, but everywhere. He looked at the screen one last time. I won't miss it next time, Deku vowed. I see you, Shigaraki. And I'm coming for you. The void in Class 1A was a tragedy, but the fire igniting in the apartment in Yuzurifa was a revolution.